While 20 Democrats succeeded in making the debate stage for the second Democratic debate, there were still others who will be left out. Seth Moulton, Joe Sestak, Tom Steyer, Wayne Messam, and Mike Gravel will not appear. In this video, I'm going to break down how the DNC and CNN decided on who would qualify to make the second Democratic debate, and how they decided to split the candidates into the two nights, by exposing the rules they set in the first place, and explaining how they carried them out. I hope to give you the opportunity to ask the question, is that fair? The first thing you might notice about the debate lineups this time around is that the nights are more balanced than the June NBC debates, and that's thanks to a better draw system designed by CNN. To ensure that there would be no kids' table featuring Elizabeth Warren, CNN split the pack into 3 groups rather than 2. This made all the difference. It's not often I say something nice about CNN, but they did a much better job of this than NBC. Designating a specific tier for the top 4, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren, CNN guaranteed that each night would have 2 headliners. To prevent a night from having 10 Steve Bullocks, the bottom 10 were made their own tier. Separate from the middle 6, each tier grants half of their members to each night. As a result, each night was guaranteed to have 2 headliners, 3 mid-level contenders, and 5 unlikely prospects. My only complaint is how they separated the middle tier from the bottom. The DNC and CNN did not specify how they established the cutoffs for each grouping, and to me, they are slightly off. RCP poll averages would designate the middle 6 to be Buttigieg, O'Rourke, Booker, Yang, Gabbard, and Klobuchar. The middle draw group for the DNC and CNN included Julian Castro and excluded Tulsi Gabbard. That's very strange to me, as Tulsi ranks a full 5 candidates ahead of Castro according to RCP. I actually get wanting to put Castro in that middle grouping. He did a great job in his first debate, but Tulsi did pretty good herself. Her decimation of Tim Ryan was probably the most exciting moment from the night 1 debate.
When we weren't in there, they started flying planes into our buildings. So I'm just saying right now,
the Taliban didn't attack us on 9/11. Al-Qaeda did.
Nonetheless, this is a minor issue. One candidate swap is strange and a little annoying, but it is unlikely to have a serious effect on much. I still think CNN did a great job overall here with having the 3-tier system. While CNN did a great job of balancing the nights, the DNC was not quite as proficient with their side of the bargain. CNN's job was to designate which candidates participate in each night. The DNC's job was to decide who makes the cut for the second debate in the first place. Their intentions at the outset seemed perfectly good. They set 2 rules for qualification. To qualify for the second debate, a candidate would need to get either 1% support in at least 3 qualifying national or early state polls, or attain at least 65,000 unique donors. In the case where more than 20 candidates qualified, the DNC would give preference to those who qualified in both polls and donors. But that's where things get tricky. Several candidates didn't meet either threshold: Seth Moulton, Joe Sestak, Tom Steyer, and Wayne Messam. Having failed to do so, they of course were discounted out of hand. But with 20 slots to fill, 21 candidates made at least one of the 2 thresholds, meaning just 1 candidate had to be left out. 7 candidates made one of the 2 thresholds. Michael Bennet, Steve Bullock, Bill de Blasio, John Delaney, John Hickenlooper, and Tim Ryan made the polls threshold. Mike Gravel made just the donor threshold. Perhaps because Gravel was the easy odd man out, he was the one who was cut. Seems about as fair as you can be given the unfortunate circumstances. But there's a couple of things that make this a problematic decision. I'll get into that in a moment, but first let's talk just a little bit about the significance of cutting Mike Gravel from the debates. Mike Gravel may seem like a pointless addition to the debates because he has stated on numerous occasions that he doesn't want to be president, and his campaign does not actually have the goal of making him president. His goal, in fact, is to broaden the discussion Democrats are having, to include issues like political corruption and the ethics of the American empire. Now, as a progressive myself, Gravel's message is one I may be biased in favor of wanting to hear. But I'm not the only one who thinks it's important for his voice to be heard. Plenty of minor candidates have run campaigns focused squarely on getting their voices heard on the debate stage. Andrew Yang being an obvious example in the early days of his campaign. But even Gravel's competitor in this primary process, Marianne Williamson, seems to agree that his voice is necessary. Despite struggling herself to gain traction, her campaign sent out an email to supporters asking them to donate to Gravel's campaign in an effort to get him on the debate stage. This act of selflessness speaks volumes about the character of Marianne Williamson, but it also speaks to the significance of Gravel's message. Even his competitors want it heard. Now let's return to the reasoning behind Gravel getting cut from the debates, despite passing the donor threshold. It may have seemed like a fair decision since he was in a category of 1 and there was just one person who needed to be cut. But like I said, there's at least 2 problems with the conclusion that he should be the candidate prevented from taking the debate stage. First, since far fewer candidates made the donor threshold than the polls threshold, it seems reasonable to argue that the donor threshold is the one that's harder to attain. Nearly every candidate was able to pass the polling threshold, rendering it fairly meaningless. Less than 3/4 of candidates made the donor threshold, and Gravel was the only one to do so without appearing in either night of the first debate. Gravel's unique ability to mobilize that many donors as a low-polling candidate perhaps makes him more worthy of hearing from than say Tim Ryan or John Delaney, who could not manage to make the donor threshold despite the wide-scale exposure they got from the first round of debates. The second more serious problem is why Gravel didn't make that polling threshold in the first place. Several polls did not even list him as an option for respondents to choose, a unique problem for Mike Gravel. In 4 polls that did not list Gravel as an option, every other candidate who was running at the time was listed as an option, even Seth Moulton, who failed to attain 1% anyway. Each also found above 1% for options like someone else or none of the above. Theoretically, respondents who chose options like that may have had Gravel in mind. So essentially, Gravel got totally screwed. I don't think it's the worst thing that's ever happened in human history, but a complaint seems warranted. It would in fact not be wrong to say that the game was rigged against him. There was one easier threshold which he failed to meet because he was basically barred from possible contention from the outset. Nonetheless, he managed to meet the more difficult threshold, and yet he was excluded from participating anyway. It seems reasonable then for Gravel supporters to ask, is that fair?